Hi and welcome to episode 3 of 6 Lines. Today I'm joined by a guest, award-winning fantasy author, James Barclay. James is publishing his 14th novel, The Queen's Assassin, on the 9th of June this year. I'm very, very happy to have James on the show and take this opportunity again to thank him for his time, for being so generous with it and talking so freely about his experiences of writing, his editorial processes, and some of the authors that he has received advice from or knows. I hope you enjoy.
Just let me go.
Listen and understand that Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
So you have my initial sort of thoughts on that.
Yes.
I say initial, I sat there for an hour and a half. And the first question is, to me, would be when I went to you and said, would you be willing to do it? And you said yes, and you came back on Twitter really quickly on message and said, and I've already picked the lines. Like, I've got the lines already. And I think that was in the space of 10-15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Are these lines that you've considered before, and sort of why did you choose those lines?
Well, I mean, I considered them a lot. I mean, it was a film that I saw when I was at a college in Sheffield in the early to mid 80s. And I can't remember which year it came out now. And the Terminator, but it was in sort of 84, 85.
84, yeah.
84, yes. And those lines have always stuck with me. I used to have them on my screensaver at work and all sorts of things. I mean, the Terminator is, I should say, it's my favourite film of all time, and it has been since I've seen it, and I've not seen a film that I have enjoyed better or seen more often.
Right.
Because I mean, I don't think it's spoiled to say that no one wins. It's a very un-Hollywood ending, because even though the Terminator may be gone, it's only this time, and you know there is more. You know there's a storm coming. You know that Sarah Connor is not driving into the sunlit uplands, having been victorious. And for a Hollywood movie, that still remains relatively unusual.
It is, yeah.
In a standalone, certainly, because obviously at the time that I saw it again, there is no sequel in the offing. When I saw it in '84,
for me, the two that stand out,
yeah,
but in a slightly different way, are Reservoir Dogs,
yeah,
because nobody wins,
yeah,
and you know, a normal heist movie would be Hollywood Heist, and they show it like one of the Brad Pitt type movies, you know, yeah. George Clooney. And the other one is the one with Sissy Spacek in, where she has the baby, and it turns out the Satanists actually win because they're all in the room. Rosemary's Baby.
Rosemary's Baby, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a shock. Yeah, it is a horrible film.
I mean, it's not horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think So those two
Yes.
with the Terminator, and I think one of the things about the Terminator is he says, you know, it won't stop. It's relentless.
That's it. It's the implacability of the opponent. And I mean, it's beyond her comprehension, and it might be beyond his power to stop it anyway. Which is where these lines are so powerful, because he does not know if he can actually win. He doesn't know. And actually, in the end, again, it takes a machine to kill the machine. He doesn't kill it.
Yeah.
He doesn't kill it with the weapons that he's got. And it's part of the cyclical nature of this movie, that the Terminator was created by a machine, and in the end it's killed by another machine, by another manufacturing process. It's crushed, isn't it? So
yes.
So again, that's why these lines have always stuck, because there is no getting out of it easily. There is no obvious victory. You can't. You assume there is a path. You assume that Carl Reese, the hero, is going to manage to do what he has to do in order to save her against all the odds, but actually he doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's which, when you come back to it after you watch the film, makes his lines all the more powerful, because he has doubts and he's right.
Yeah.
He's right to have those doubts.
And
I've never come across a set of lines which so succinctly and brilliantly sum up an entire narrative for a movie.
yeah.
It does it in about 30 seconds. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He delivers them brilliantly as well. That's the other thing. He's a good actor, I think, but much underrated, I think, Michael Biehn. And the way he delivers those lines leaves you with about as much hope as she has.
Yes.
Which is pretty much nothing.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about it before, and I've got written down there the next two lines, even their non-verbal responses.
Yeah.
It's not so much about hope, and it's actually, and it's not even about fighting back. It's about struggle.
Yes.
And the struggle is just to stay alive, not to defeat it.
Yeah.
And as you say, I think that's what it's. You combine that with what they reveal about the nature of the machine, and the fact that it's a machine, it won't stop. It's relentless. It has its target. It will pursue the target, and we don't even know if we can destroy the thing. And in reality, I suppose you find out through the franchise that they can't. All they can ever do is prevent parts of the story from actually taking place, and I think that kills it.
Yeah, it does, because obviously, as the series goes on, they just end out another one.
Yes. I think that was when Terminator 2 came out.
Yeah.
Obviously there were specials and everything else about it, and I remember one of the I think he was one of the guys who worked on the models, and he said that there's just a production line of these things, and they will just keep producing them until the job's done. Yeah. That's the way the machines see it. Okay, so I'm gonna look up on occasion, I think, because of all the things. So Michael Biehn, to me, isn't a hero in that film. He's somebody who's not in a sort of a typical hero. He's somebody who's been thrown into it because he was asked by somebody in the future to go back and save her. But he's dirty, he's unkempt, he's been struggling, he's been fighting a war. The war will always continue even after he dies. They kill him. You find out he's dead in Alien 3. Michael Biehn's character, after all of the introductions and everything else, he still dies.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's something that he likes about some of the characters he plays, is that he's always struggling and never quite winning.
Well, in The Abyss too. I mean, he goes insane.
Yeah, he does.
And he's struggled with himself in another super film that he's been in. So I think he does, and I think he isn't the classical shining teeth hero at all.
Yeah.
He's he's a grim man doing grim work.
Is it from a point of view of writing and sort of looking at films and TV now because of Netflix and all the HBO stuff, there's a lot more great writing out there. You filter through and you find the things that you enjoy. When Terminator came out, it was 1984, and it was a glimpse of something that was completely new. Only the Japanese had done the large robots stuff at that time. The main thing for me that I remember about the Terminator was the police station, which is part of that. Part of that sequence is he goes in, he tries to gain access, get it, and then again relentless, and he goes in and kills everybody apart from her.
Yeah.
And again, it was new because it shows the science fiction element of it in that he's a robot, but it actually puts humanity on a scale. And I mentioned in my notes about time, and saying that they took off the sort of person of the year and had the computer.
I didn't know that, actually. I hadn't done that.
No, I didn't know that, and I found it when I was doing some research.
You said yes, that was it. Yeah, the computer moves in.
Yes.
Yeah, really good.
And on that cover, the person is actually, I will get a picture and put it in to the final video, but the person is actually just sort of a shadow within that.
Okay.
So it's like they're not real. When you go back to the Terminator itself being in 1984, to me, everything since then is about computers has stemmed from people's understanding of bringing the cyborg and AI and the future into 84, and then showing you a glimpse of what people are afraid of.
Yes. Yeah.
And people are afraid of machines, the Luddites, the introduction of Japanese robotics. Was it Hayabusa, I think, was one of the big manufacturers of robotics in Japan, and they sort of then seem to have stemmed from the Terminator thing, because the narrative with sociologists and with the media and everything has followed that line ever since, which I think it shows the impact of the film.
Yeah.
Massively so as well.
Yes, I mean it was a predictor of societal fears about machines taking over, and what would all these people do when they put out jobs, and that still goes on now.
Yes.
Taking over, what will we do? Well, they'll prove time and time again that new industries grow up that need humans. But
Yes.
we still worry about it.
Yeah.
We worry about driverless trains, and we're worrying about, I know we worry about driverless cars for lots of reasons, but because they might just still mow people down in the street and stuff. But any time there's something which takes away the human interaction, there is a fear that what it's going to do is just leave millions of people on the scrap heap.
Yeah.
And so far it's never actually happened.
No, it hasn't. I mean, even humans are writing algorithms, and they write the algorithms which determine how the computer will interpret the instruction. But then included in that is trying to get to the science of having an AI that actually thinks for itself and interprets behaviour.
I mean, that might be, I mean, that was the bit about Skynet, wasn't it? That this is ultimate fear of developing sentience to decide that humans were the problem.
Yes.
So the Terminator launched this all-out offence against the human race that invented it, which is, I mean, that is a theme that's has been returned to, that humans being the disease and that sort of stuff. And actually, bizarrely, in COVID a couple of years ago, it was about nature taking control or not, and humans must be the problem.
Yes.
I don't know, you might have seen that on some hilarious people on Twitter just saying nature is here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with the Terminator films, just the franchise, by the time sort of the last couple have happened, it's like Dark Fate and stuff. They're looking for new angles of how to play it, but the mechanics, everything else of the story is always the same.
Yeah.
The machine is at the core of it, not the humans. So, if we move on from that, when you looked at those lines, like we've discussed, like the impact of them and everything else, what is it when you write a piece of dialogue that you actually? What do you compare your dialogue to something before you're writing, or do you have an idea of the way a story flows and just?
Yeah, well, yes, I suppose I do. I think when I'm writing dialogue, I'll have a vague notion of what I'm trying to impart through that piece of dialogue. But I never plan it.
Right.
Because you have to allow your character to give a response you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Quite often, I'll find when I'm writing dialogue that I mean, it's really hard to explain. You'll understand it because you're a writer, but you have to kind of let them go. And you just have to type out the thing that they would probably say in response. It isn't necessarily the thing that you wanted them to say.
Yes, that does happen.
You know, it's like, no, how far is it to the bridge? Well, I don't know. Oh, damn. It's like, you were supposed to say 3 miles. Well, I don't know. So I know that's a simplistic example, but individual characters will react to what they hear and what the person has said, depending on their mood, their circumstance, their knowledge, all sorts of stuff. And they can take something as a joke, they can take it as an insult. So quite often when I'm writing a piece of dialogue, it does not go in any way the way I want it to go. And you end up thinking, well, I've now written like 2 pages of dialogue, I have not given the actual piece of information I wanted to. But the dialogue's really good. And then it becomes in edit, what do you do with it?
Yes.
Sometimes I'll keep it because actually it imparts a lot about the characters themselves and the way they think and feel. Sometimes it's got to go because effectively it's fluff and it's a distraction you can't afford. But then you have to rewrite the dialogue because then you still need to impart that piece of information you were trying to impart. Otherwise you can't move your plot. So,
yeah. I find writing dialogue the same way. I start writing, and I've said on Twitter in responses to people before that the way I've found it happens is some characters shout louder for a voice, and you just know at that point, and it's you're 14 books in, right? Mm-hmm. And you've written other things as well, and other things that, like script writing and screenwriting, that type of stuff. So you edit at your peril, because to me, the delivery of dialogue is about the development of the character, and that comes first before actually giving the plot. But you have to, as you say, you have to go back and insert.
But that's the problem, because I know you've asked what's the main purpose of dialogue. The trouble is it's got quite a lot of main purposes. In reality. Now I could argue with you that it actually is about plot development because they're there to say something.
Yes.
And a bit like, in these 6 lines, those 6 lines delivered so well, they define the film on their own. I mean, despite what you've already seen the Terminator do, that it coalesces everything about the film into those few lines.
Yeah.
But I'd be fascinated to know the torture they would have gone through to make it that succinct.
Yes.
To get over all that information, but it would have taken the writer an awful long time, I suspect. And as it came out straight away and it happened to work, you can see it being a big conversation. You can imagine a big conversation in that Eckhart going on about what it was that's just happened and who is it, why are you chasing it, and all that sort of stuff. But what you get is Connery is just delivering it just like that because he has to get them out of there.
Yeah.
So again, that's why I think they are particularly powerful, particularly well written, and particularly well delivered.
Yeah.
And they also, of course, and it's really good that you ran on a little bit to the bit where he's expressing his doubt, is that it informs you about him.
Yes.
great deal. It developed his character too, about why he's there, who he is, and what he wants to achieve.
Yeah. And that's you tie that plot reveal in with the character, and
Yes.
it works for that reason. And I think, as you say, it would be brilliant to be able to get the be a fly on the wall at
All the
your
early
discussion.
drafts of it, how many must have argued about it.
Yeah, because James Cameron apparently is hated by his crew and the actors. Arnold Schwarzenegger said he's like terrible to work with, but he knows what he wants, so you trust him because he knows where he wants it to go. But he did say afterwards everything's fine. James is great afterwards. Yeah. So when we talk about that piece of dialogue, so I said about him, he doesn't reassure her.
No.
He actually raises the stakes.
Yes.
It becomes, all of a sudden, it's like the world explodes through those lines. The world, but it's our world. It isn't the future. It was then,
Yes,
when
that's
it was
right.
filmed. And we could talk about the advent of the computer and Luddites and everything else. But he presents a danger to her, and the subtext is about technology and how technology pushes things on. But he also, in those lines, it's 6 lines, succinct, delivered directly. He uses fear, the truth, but fear to get her to comply. He changes everything by the end of those 6 lines. The world has completely changed at that point for her, and she can't go back. She can't. All she can do is actually struggle to survive. Until the end of the film, she'll either die, or, and the Terminator side, the machine side, wins. And he's willing to have a go at it, which reveals his character. But then the message over and over is there's no redemption and there's no escape.
No.
But there's some tiny, tiny glimmer of hope while you're still alive.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
when you look at those lines, to me it's got like a slightly, and I only realised this earlier, it's got a slightly messianic feel in that she's to give birth to a human Messiah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought that's interesting. Very interesting.
You know, and I thought, I wonder if they actually meant that, because you can take, like, there's lots of things. Jordan Peterson talks about it in his lectures and things. He often goes back to the Bible to look at it and says, look, these are like archetypes. You can explain and see a lot of human nature in these stories, which I suppose you can in all of the, the larger religions. But in pop culture, I think the significance of the Terminator just can't be overstated. The way it's absolute in its approach through the action, through those 6 lines of dialogue, but also the world was changing at that point in 1984.
Yeah.
And it's like James Cameron saying, okay, technology and everything else is all moving ahead, and you cannot stop it. You can't stop these things happening, and therefore the only thing you can do is move with it.
Yes, try and ride the wave, yeah, because then riding the wave is the only way you can exert any control.
Yeah. And we talked about AI and things. I'm gonna sort of first question about that. What other lines did you consider using? What would you go to?
I'm probably the other one I was considering now, because I used to use it as an audition speech, and it's an Alec Baldwin speech. Now I cannot remember what the name of the film was, but he is playing a surgeon who is accused of malpractice.
Oh, right.
But it's a superb speech where he likens himself to God in the operating theatre, and it's brilliant.
Okay.
And if I was actually doing an English tomorrow, I'd be able to recite the entire thing. So I'd have studied it to pieces. But those lines, and again, because they're slightly out of the ordinary, and again, it's delivered from a position of great confidence and great power.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, Coleridge has a lot of confidence that he's right about how terrible things are. In this film, I wish I don't know what it's called now. Never mind. And Alec Baldwin is so convinced of his skill and his righteousness that it lets him. It eventually lets him down. He starts off in a very matter-of-fact way, and by the end of the speech, he is saying, "I am God."
Yes. Yeah.
And it's because, and you can see where he's coming from, because he kind of is, because he has the power of life and death over the person he's operating.
The script writers were aiming for when you just look back at those lines.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night actually. I think they wanted to describe the heart of the threat, and it's interesting in that it comes immediately after the scene in the bar, Tech Noir, doesn't it? Where and it's absolutely, it still sends shivers up my spine in that scene now, because his use of slow motion in this scene is quite something, because it manages to demonstrate exactly how close the Terminator comes to seeing her and killing her before Kyle Reese comes in, because he turns and knocks a bottle of water off the table.
Yes.
Remember, like it was yesterday. And then as she leans down, he turns to look her way, and he turns away and she gets up. Doesn't even see the Terminator.
Yeah.
She thinks it's Kyle Reese that's going to cause the problem.
Yeah.
He's the one that she phones the police about. So, and then you see very much, they see Kyle Reese take on the Terminator and then grab her and take her out with that famous old line, "Come with me if you want to live," which is what Schwarzenegger says to her, of course, in P2.
Yeah.
So I've always enjoyed that. So after you've seen what the threat is, because you see how hard it is to put the Terminator down with multiple rounds of a shotgun, and they have to run, the Terminator comes straight out after them, more or less. You then get these lines which tell you what the heart of the threat is. They tell you it's kill or be killed. They tell you it's a literal fight to the death. They tell you it's a struggle for survival. And I think that's what they were aiming at. So although they've demonstrated that there is a threat in this bar scene, what they do then is absolutely stick it straight to you.
Yeah.
Exactly what the problem is. I think that's what they were aiming to do. And they did it. Now,
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, they do. They do. And when you picked the 6 lines, I thought, wow, yeah, and I read
And
them.
also she doesn't really believe him, despite what she's just seen.
Yes.
You're willing to believe the policeman, they say, is just a guy high on PCP. You know, when he punches his hand through the windscreen and stuff, and
Yeah.
all that. And when he must be wearing bulletproof vests, and because they will try and, all they can of course do is explain in the context of what they know, what they can comprehend.
Yes.
Police, and she's happy to believe. So, despite what she's seen, despite what he says, despite what he then sees of the Terminator very, very close up, straight after that, she still has doubts
Yeah.
for quite some time about whether he's actually telling the truth.
And when looking at that scene where he says about PCP, he's probably on PCP. I've seen a guy punch through the windscreen and things, and then the guy looks at him, the other copper looks at him as if to say, like, that's enough, and he goes, oh, okay. And then he disbelieves, because, as you say, he's doing it in context of the things that he actually knows. And then Schwarzenegger, as the Terminator, gets into the police station and disproves everything he said, but they still struggle against the Terminator in exactly the same way Kyle Reese does, but none of them actually survive. So Schwarzenegger, of all the things we'd said, I think Schwarzenegger is like the Grim Reaper. If you're born, you will be followed by this thing and you will die.
Yeah.
You know,
when it's your time. Yeah.
yeah, and he'll make sure that that time is as short as possible once he's on your tail as well.
Yeah.
The my note there says that Kyle Reese is in some ways the opposite of a knight in shining armour. Not because he's just dirty and dishevelled, everything else, but
wearing pants, trousers, Reuben, don't forget.
yeah, and he's there, and he's there to save her. In order to save her, he scares the living daylights out of her. She still doesn't believe him, as you said. She bites him on the hand just before those lines as well, and he says, "Cyborgs don't feel pain. I do." Yeah. And that shows how vulnerable he is as well. Because I don't recall how many actual shotgun rounds he puts through the Terminator, but the thing still gets back up afterwards. And I think that's the real scary thing about 1984. In 1984, the movies, a lot of shotguns and things were being used. And later on in his career there's the auto loader, but if you look at Schwarzenegger films, there's always a big shotgun scene. It's like massive overpower like shotgun, and still it doesn't take the Terminator down. Let's see, what's been your experience of writing dialogue, and how can that gap be bridged?
This is between the readers and viewers.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I struggled with this one actually. So, but I mean, my experience of writing dialogue is as we alluded to earlier, it's this way of not really having a plan beyond. I'd like to get to a point where the audience knows this,
right?
That we know this. That's it. That's the entirety of my plan for any piece of dialogue. And as I say, also to let it go in any direction at once. And sort of famously, because like everyone must know it, but when I was writing my book, The Ascendance of Escherichia, The Cry of the Newborn, the first one of those two huge, great, sprawling Romanesque epic it is, Reuben.
It is, I've read it.
But one of the main characters in that, when I planned the entire book out, he was a bit part in 2 chapters. And he became an absolute driving force throughout the entire series because of one conversation when he rides up on horseback and asks a couple of questions. And he just, you're talking about characters shouting loud.
Yeah.
He shouted so loud, I thought, this guy is just cool. And the character was going to be the chaperone of these new young magicians that had just been, just sort of come out of themselves and were able to perform some limited magic. The guy who's going to chaperone them, I ditched him and brought in this guy in who was actually the head tax of the Empire, Paul Jarrett, his name was. And from the first time he opened his mouth, again, this is where it's hard to explain to a non-writer how it works, because they think, well, you must know what he's going to say, and actually I haven't got a clue what he's really going to say, really, roughly, maybe.
Yeah.
But as soon as he opened his mouth and said one line, I thought, oh, hang on. And I thought I just let him go.
Yeah, the main character.
That's one of my favourite characters.
The main character in Dissension was, I thought it was going to be one, and I started writing him, and it was interesting, and it was moving along. But they say he got dropped. He's not dropped. He still appears in the book because he's relegated.
I get the same thing. The guy that was going to be the chaperone, he's still there.
Yeah.
He stays back home.
Yeah.
There you go. But anyway, so there's that. And I think I write quite visually. And what I think you have to try and do to bridge the gap in dialogue terms is to write in, how can I put it, like identifiable and relatable ways to your readers, so that they can. Because what we're always asking our readers to do is to visualise, I think, the characters that we're writing about, or the characters that are speaking. So I think if your dialogue works, it opens the doors to allow the readers to see who the character is, and then perhaps at the end, because I don't necessarily describe my characters in massive detail.
No.
I might tell you what their hair colour is or something like that, or the colour bright. I don't go into details. I'm not sure that it matters. It matters that they're a big warrior, then it matters that they're big.
Yeah.
And a small warrior matters that they're small, perhaps. But beyond that, I'm not sure it matters much. And I quite like the readers to make their own images of what the characters look like for them.
Yeah.
And you can impart that through dialogue too, because sometimes the way people speak, if it's in a jokey way, you might describe them a different facial comparison to if they are, facial characteristics to if they're always terribly serious, because you can imagine if they're always serious, I mean, they might have lines on their face, high cheekbones and that sort of stuff, and if they're a joker, they probably won't, probably got a softer, happier face.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe that. So I think that's how I would try and bridge the gap between reader and viewer, is in the tone of voice that the character uses and literally the words they say and how they structure them, whether they are joking or whether they are serious, and what devices they use to get their points across. I think. But again, as you all know, dialogue's not always conscious, like fully conscious task, bizarrely.
Yeah.
It becomes more conscious when you read it back, and you either think, "Oh, that's great," or you think, "Oh, that's just stilted nonsense," because all I've done is exactly list out what I wanted people to know.
Yeah.
And we've all been there. We better do dialogue. We thought no one would ever say that. No one would react like that to the line before, ever.
Yeah.
Unless they're reading off a script, and that's what you want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, I think bridging that gap, it is that you just. I think it may have been Terry Brooks in his book Sometimes the Magic Works, said you need to give the reader enough information about the character through dialogue or description and action that they can fill the rest in.
I agree. Yeah, that's good.
You know, and if you're not allowing the reader to, if you're trying to explain everything to the reader, all you do is you sort of information dump, but you're not actually welcoming the reader into the book.
No.
I mean, your duology, Esther, I've read both of them. I've lost my copy.
Congratulations. That's exactly right.
They're only about, I think, 1,100, 1,200 pages in paperback.
Yeah, 500,000 words in there.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes, I'll never do it again.
Yeah,
That's a big lesson I took away from those books. Reuben. Never write massive books like that.
Well, what about things like the Wheel of Time and stuff like that? They go way back. And well, Wheel of Time, is it still going or is it finished?
I think, who was it? Someone has written the last volume.
Yeah.
I've never been a fan, so I can't really say.
Me neither.
I read one and I found it was over-described. For me, people love it, so I'm not going to knock it in any way. But for me, there was too much description. It was too slow. But that's just me. That's one of those opinion. But they've been fantastically successful. So what the hell do I know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you look at it as first, second draft, and then the editor will come in later? So how do you think? How do you get to the point where you believe that your story, your dialogue, is actually coalescing into something that you really are happy with?
I think probably know straight away when a scene or a piece of dialogue is working, because it'll feel like it's flowing, and when it feels like it's flowing, it probably is.
Yeah.
And if as you're drafting something, you get to the end of a line of dialogue, you don't know how to write the next one, or you're in the middle of a line, and you can't stop and have a cup of tea, then it probably isn't working.
Yeah.
And particularly in dialogue, but also in combat scenes, I think the pace is really important, and the pace for me often comes from me just sitting there going,
right,
till that bit is done. And if I've stuck it in the middle of my timing, because that means I haven't let myself go.
Yeah.
And I haven't let the characters say what they want to say, and I've been forcing them to say it, and in your mind you know it's wrong. But I don't think. But then I think that's redeemable though, because then you'll go back to read that scene, because I'll read it the next day, whatever it is I've written, and then you'll know whether you can leave it because it's okay, or whether you've just got to scrap it and do it all over again. It's going to lead you in the wrong direction in the next scene.
Yeah.
So with any piece of dialogue, I just need to know that when I read it, it rings like it might actually be a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's first draft. I don't think it's any other draft. So I think if it's really clumsy and stilted, and you feel like the character is just reading lines for you, then it's got to go. You've got to start again. You've got to try it again.
Yeah.
And I'll probably just delete it. Really, I'll often not even save it. If it's rubbish, I'll just ditch it.
Yeah. I mean, I've got, I don't know how many versions, but archived. I just archived.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that was on Twitter the other day. You were answering that question. So I don't do it like that, but I think it's a really good way to. Because is that how you mark your progress in terms of how much you're improving your work? Would you say, or not?
I think
I'll ask the question too, Reuben.
That's fine, because let me think. I archive it because I want to have a record of what I've written before,
Yeah.
and if I keep everything on a spreadsheet anyway. I've got multiple spreadsheets for it, so I know I have notes and names and things. Because I gave up on notebooks because I love notebooks, a nice notebook, but you know that you look in a writer's notebook, it isn't organised. It's all over the place.
I've got 4 on my desk here at the moment, in fact. They're the ones I'm using currently.
Yeah, I've got one underneath there. It was Peter McLean said, he said that he has a Bible. So I bought my son this big thick book that he's never used, and he gave it back to me. So I wrote in gold pen, Book Bible, Alliance of Enemies, and I've never used it because everything is in spreadsheet form. So I track my progress and how things have worked. I suppose by keeping the archive, because then I can look back. But I also, I don't know how you, in terms of your drafting and your editing process, I go back and probably read 2 or 3 pages with an editing eye from the day before, and then go, okay, and go through it and start changing things, and that gets me into the flow of the writing.
I think it's always worth doing. I would tend to read the scene that I've written the day before I read it again.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, because otherwise, if you start cold every single time you come to the PC because you've not, because you haven't quite remembered what it is you wrote yesterday, then you're going to get disjointed product at the end. It's just that's just counting, isn't it? Really, you can. So yes, you read it because it gets you back into the atmosphere, back into the scene, back into the pace, back into everything, back into the character you were talking about.
Yeah.
A bit of advice I got off David Gemmell, which is good, is that he would finish a scene and then start the next one but not finish it.
Right.
So that when he comes back, he's already got. So he's not ever. He was never coming in cold to a scene. So he's finished one scene, does a little bit of the next one, and then the next morning, once he's read everything, he's already got a start. He's already ahead.
That's what I should be doing.
It's psychologically quite a good way of doing it. I do that quite a lot.
Because that's a really good tip, because when I'm writing, if I get to the end, I'm playing out a scene and the dialogues work for me and everything, I get to the end, if I finish a chapter, that I tend to find that so much harder to go back into. So from now on, I'm going to follow that. I'm not going to finish a chapter.
I don't think it has to be much. It can just be a few paragraphs is enough.
Yeah.
I think you've got to do half of it, just a little bit, just because I guess what you're then doing is you're carrying over your energy from the end of the last scene straight into the start of the next one.
Yeah. Now you've written 14 books, right?
Yes.
Well, 14 published books. You've got other stuff.
Books and 2 published novellas if you want.
Yeah. How is your editor involved?
Well, actually, she's involved much more throughout the course of the book than she was before. But I've had 2 editors.
Right.
I swapped editors because my first editor, wonderful human being called Simon Spanish, left Gollancz.
Oh, right.
Well, actually, I was being edited by Gillian Redfearn before he left, but he was my guiding light first on the books, and he was very influential in my development as a published author. We have quite a close working relationship. I find with Gillian, particularly in his last book, actually, we've been very involved in conversations and in emails and whatnot, all those through the process, and right from the get-go.
Yeah.
So I think although there's less sort of hand-holding necessary, because I've written 14 and I've published 13 novels and I've got 14 coming out, so I don't need that. But what we do find we have is much more frank conversations about certain characters or scenes or themes. Some structural stuff might come up like it did in Queen's Assassin. So our relationship has developed from one of sort of finessing what I'd done to us being able to say to each other, this entire section, that doesn't really work in the context of your main plot drivers. Have you thought about stripping it out, or actually bringing it, or actually streamline it, to actually make it work as a narrative strand alongside the main plot? That would be a lot of work for you, but what do you think? And then you go and think about it. Because I think, again, if you're not working with your editor to make your book the best thing it can be, if you're too proud of every single word you've written to change it because your editor thinks that word might not be right, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Your editor is literally there to help you. And a good editor will never, ever change the way a book is written, because that's yours. If they're a great editor, like both Simon and Gillian have been for me, what they will do is they will help make what you have written a much better end product.
Right.
And from that point of view, actually my editing process hasn't changed a bit since I started.
Right.
I don't need so many of the basic things pointed out as I used to.
Okay. And when did you start writing?
My first book was published in 1999.
But that wasn't the first thing you wrote, though, was it?
No, my God, I've been writing stories since I was 11 years old, Reuben. I've been wanting to be an author since I was 11.
Right.
I think it's 7 now. So
Yeah.
it's been forever. I've written some spectacularly awful sort of novels when I was young. But Daunted was the first book that I wrote, which was a proper full-length novel, which looked like it might be able to be published.
Right.
And even then, it had to undergo some significant change.
It's published from that. Because that was that with Orion?
It was, yeah, well, they're Millennium, sort of, Orion Millennium at the time. It's got Gollancz now, which is the same. It's the same publishing house I've been with the entire time.
Right.
And well, it's not different, too different from many other people. In that I had to go out with my chapters and my synopsis and my letter and keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew Simon from school. He's a school friend of mine, and we were at college together and stuff. But actually, and people would say, "Well, that's so easy to get published." It actually made it harder when he was interested in a book, because he had to prove to everyone in his firm they wasn't publishing me because he was my mate.
Right.
So it went round. So before Daunted got accepted, it went out to the publishing director, it went out to the whole sales team, went out to the whole marketing team, and that doesn't necessarily always happen. So literally anyone read it, or read enough of it, to say actually okay.
So with him being your friend, obviously he's got to make a professional choice, and it's about his career as well.
Well, he has his integrity.
Yeah.
And he has complete integrity. And it's funny, it made it difficult because I thought it was ready to publish when I first sent it to him, and he sent it back saying, yes, good, but he said, it's what you've written. So he likened it to a skeleton. He said, what you've written something which is like, it's like the spine,
right,
and maybe the arms and legs, but it doesn't have flesh in it. It isn't round enough and not complete enough.
And what in that case?
Sorry.
In that case, what was the flesh?
It was more that there needs to be more about the world in which the Reuben inhabited. There needs to be more about, there needs to be more sort of character development, more understanding of where they've been and who they were to each other, more about the threat that the Witch Lords, that they presented to the world and where they came from. So it was just rounding it out, and it wasn't fleshing it out. Is kind of the wrong word. It was making it whole.
So was it like adding world building elements?
Some world building elements. Because the thing is, that the action was fine and the spells are great. And it's all terribly exciting at 100 miles an hour. But I think what the impact on the wider world when I first written it wasn't. You couldn't feel that. It was all too small. It was all just about Raven, just about the witch doctors, and that was it.
Right.
It needs to be more than that. You need to be able to explain within the pages what it meant if they lost, what it meant when they won, what it meant when one of them died. So, because I kind of, in my naivety when I was young, when I was a young writer, that you don't necessarily do those things.
Yeah.
Not well, I did. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So the answer I got from him was, what he didn't do was send it back saying no thank you, which is what other people did.
Yeah.
So, because I knew him, we could go for a pint and he would say, this is my opinion. And he said, you can go with it if you want. I'm not making you. But if you do all this stuff, and then by all means send it back.
Yeah. Which is, did you find at any point it was, he's sort of, he was your very first editor?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So was, by going, so in a way he was acting like your agent and your editor.
Yeah, you didn't have an agent at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, and he was tough. We didn't strain our relationship or anything like that, but he would not put his punches. He didn't like something. He's not going to, because he's my friend, he's going to say, well, no, that's actually okay. He just said, no, this is awful.
Yeah.
Rewrite that, or I hate the name of that character, you've got to change that, or whatever it might be. So, and so, I mean, we're still really, really good friends now. So we had to damage ourselves through it. But
it sounds like it was really productive in a way as well.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the benefits was that it taught me how important the editor-author relationship is.
Yeah.
Because obviously I was prepared to be much more, I'd be much more accepting of something that he said than someone I hadn't known in my life.
Yeah.
But again, that made it harder, because I think it made it hard for me to admit that I might have got it wrong.
Yeah.
Authors, we like to think we've got everything right all the time. And
yeah.
Sadly, that isn't quite the case.
Mm. When it came to the Queen's Assassin, then, do you find the editing touches lighter? Or do you find that we're presenting somebody who has put out all these quality books in the past, therefore this one has got to be of a certain standard?
Yes, I think better. I think all the authors, we all try to make our next book the best one we've ever written, but I think this one had to be a significant step up in terms of its quality and just everything about it needs to be better. The characterizations, the dialogue, the action when it happened, the whole world and how that worked together, all had to be better. And I had to write it better than I'd written any other book. The language had to be more select and strong, had to be stronger. That doesn't mean just use bigger, fancier words. It's the way every sentence hangs together. And I spent more time, I think, on this book, looking at every sentence, every line of dialogue than I had done in any other book. And that's part of author's development, to understand that these things are more important than you thought they were the last time. They're always important.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they become more important, and you understand the value of the real, and being really analytical about what it is you've written. And I hadn't brought that to bear in quite such a high degree in any other book that I've written, I don't think.
So there's just sort of an aside question to that. When you read somebody else's work, then do you find yourself being analytical, or do you drop your own internal editor and then read?
Really good question, because I think sometimes the only time you literally drop internal editors when the writing is so good, it just carries you away.
Right.
I think probably. because there's always sometimes you think, oh, so that's a bit clumsy. You think rather, and then the next thing comes in your head is, I might read it like this. But that's really pompous. That's such a pompous thing to do. It's not my book. And the author could have wanted exactly that line in exactly that way, and they probably did. I just happened to like it, and so I think you have to stop yourself doing it. But I think inevitably you do it in the same way when I watch TV. I've never had a screenplay made into anything, or a stage play. I've got plenty of scripts, but I've never had them made into anything. It doesn't stop me looking at other people going, oh dear, sometimes, and you think, that is so arrogant.
Yeah.
Stop it immediately.
There is, and in a way it takes. You say the writing is so good, so if it's not taking you somewhere, I think you tend to be a bit more like that, analytical.
Well, again, I think because you ask yourself why it is.
Yeah.
Inside, and then sometimes it comes out.
Yeah.
Now, in the book, I'm not expecting to not going to enjoy. But a book I didn't know if I'd enjoy or not. Like I read Adrian Crofty's Children of Time.
Oh yeah.
It's just brilliant. And I thought, because I'm not a massive reader of science fiction, I read it because it's won awards. Everyone says it's great. I'll give it a go. I mean, Adrian's friend, I like Adrian, so I haven't read many of his books. I'll read one. It's genius. It's honestly, and it just again, I didn't for once look at that and think, I tell you what, I wouldn't have written it like that.
Yeah.
Because I just thought it's quite a big old book.
Because I recommended it to you, Fletcher's Ghosts of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I haven't gone for it yet. But yes,
now, as an indie author, I was like thinking, like, I want to buy an indie book, and so I looked through a lot of his titles and was like, okay, this one sounds intriguing, so bought it on Kindle. Couldn't stop reading it from the moment I started, and I never had these points at all in that book where, as you said, because I was really absorbed in the actual story of, I wouldn't have written that, I wouldn't have done it like this. All I could think of is at certain points in that book was, you evil man, for actually for doing those things to those people. Yeah. Because there's a scene with a barn, and it describes the characters turning up. Now the characters that are like Terminators in a way, but they're a human consciousness entrapped, being extracted and placed on a mainframe somewhere, and the machine basically acts out what the mainframe is telling it to do. But what they've been telling it to do is what they've been trained to do, which is assassinate and kill. Now, the killer bit is they're all children. All the machines that are doing the killing are like child soldiers in Africa, in Angola and places where they're being used. So Fletcher just comes across as, wow, but also really daring in writing that type of stuff, because I don't read science fiction, and part of it has got a science fiction element to it because of the AIs and things, but otherwise I just got completely lost in that book. And I messaged him and told him he was an evil man for doing things like that. And I think if maybe because he's been in the traditional publishing business, but he's out of it. And this was one, it was known as 66, I think the title was, before he changed it to Ghost of Tomorrow. And it never got published, but they own the rights to it. And then they gave him the rights back. He asked nicely, and he got them back and developed this short story into Ghost of Tomorrow. And I would highly recommend that for something that the horror of it at times, and they're children and they've got this adult training to be nothing but killers. Yeah. And then there's one machine that has a you really like him, and then he gets turned into one of these machines. He becomes entrapped in this combat chassis, and that's a great book, I find.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's funny. One thing you do stop to, when you're reading a great book, you can stop to be jealous about, I do anyway, about how brilliant the writing is, and wish I could be as good as that.
Yeah, there is that.
It's quite aspirational though, because you think, okay, I've got a way to go. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, my friends wrote. I've written songs and played them on guitar and stuff and could sing them. And my friend wrote something, and he said, "Oh, I've got this thing to play you." So he played it to me. This is like sort of 15, 16 years ago. And when he finished, I said, "That's brilliant. I wish I'd written that," because it's done with such humour, but also the way he strung the song together and the way he tells the story of this relationship between this boy and girl. It just works, and I think that's when you get to the end you think, oh yeah, I wish I had written that. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't write something like Ghosts of Tomorrow simply because that isn't me, but I can certainly kill people and have the Rosemary's Baby moment.
Yeah, but I think it's probably not the whole thing. There are sort of passages within a book you just think that's just really sad. How and then sometimes I've done, even though you're being swept along, sometimes you might go back and think, how is that so good? And I might look over it again to analyse how it is that I haven't written anything quite that good myself ever. I did that with ages. I'm not a science fiction writer. I mean, Alfred Granite's very vaguely science fiction, but really, it doesn't deal with high science like Adrian's stuff does.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop. It doesn't so well. It didn't stop me. Because again, it's still all about characters. It's all about people. And the spiders in this case, of course. So it's interesting to analyse in a sort of outside your own genre how you can, how people construct things so well.
Yeah.
But that it gives you that kind of rush as you read it. That's just beautiful. When you look at fantasy books and stuff now, what draws your eye to something in terms of what you're looking for? I don't think I like points of difference. I think we all look for something that's unique, and Stable Boy Make Kings are all a bit dull now. You might think it's done to death, but I'm sure there are ways of doing it which will make it really brilliant. But that's why, for instance, I enjoy R.J. Barker's Bone Shift trilogy so much, because it's different.
Right.
Oh, it was a new world, and again, the characterization is something superb. And I knew he was a good writer because I read his Assassins books. I knew, the guy can write really well, so it's liable to be good. You're going to give it a go because it's a story you've not heard before.
Yeah.
So, I don't actually read a massive amount of fantasy now.
Oh, don't you?
No, I used to read fantasy after fantasy, but I'm kind of dodging around a bit. I'm actually going back to some classics because my eldest son's doing Steinbeck and Arthur Miller for his GCSE.
Right.
And I have never read Of Mice and Men. I thought that is shocking.
Wow.
So I think it might have arrived while we were talking. I heard the doorbell go. And but I also got View from the Bridge, Arthur Miller, which I've seen on stage, but I've never read it played. So
Right, I've not.
I'm going to read some. So I'm going to read those and see. I read some factual stuff. I read some science fiction. I'm reading a book by some guy called Eckhart at the moment.
Are you reading that?
It is a fantasy book.
Don't read the night.
I'm enjoying it, mate.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of another major in Tchaikovsky as well. So I'm reading actually several things at once, and I quite like doing it.
I do that.
I actually often didn't like it. Currently, I really like it. And I think, what mood am I in? If I'm in a high science mood, I'm not going to pick up Adrian's book. I'll pick up yours instead.
Right.
And now, if I feel like I want to delve back to 1930s America, I should look at Steinbeck.
Yeah. It's when I was in school, we were tortured. You're a couple of years older than me. We were tortured with the Steinbeck of Mice and Men. It went over and over and over. And yet, all these years later, I left school in 86, I think. which is such a long time ago, and yet it's still being taught now. My daughter's doing, or will be doing later this year, or no, early next year, Animal Farm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what I was doing over there.
Yeah, that was that everywhere I remember there was that. There was Alan Silito's was it The Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner?
Okay.
That was on Billy Liar as well. Yeah, there were all these texts out there, and they were like grey books in school. So they never inspired us to read in school. Whereas now there's a lot more focus on reading.
Yeah.
And
there is, yeah.
But I think you can put kids off reading as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like my son has just started back reading. He hasn't read anything for 7 years apart from what's on his phone. And honestly, that is just it was terrible for me, because I always read, and then he read mine, and he said I really enjoyed it, and he's asked for the manuscript of it for number 2. And he's like, well, I said, so, and he gives really good feedback as well. And I'm thinking, he's going to make a great reader. But the reason he's doing it is because his girlfriend started reading this book and she couldn't put it down. And he was like, what's that about? Right. And he got hooked in that way. So he started, well, it was...
she seems like a very sensible person to get to hang on to her.
Yes. I know, they've been together nearly a year. And... she's got him back into reading, which is a good thing.
Excellent.
Yeah. If you were looking, I've got a question up there.
Go on.
What would you add to explain the T1000?
Yeah,
what the script developments?
I'm really struggling with this one, because I don't know. I don't know that you have to add anything. Because for me, the T1000 is technological advance from the CSM 101. From Arnold Schwarzenegger's original, and it is a program, and it has tools, and it executes its program using those tools. And I think it can. And gosh, really, oh my God, my memory is terrible, because I like the actor that played it.
Robert Patrick.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can remember him.
Popped up stuff like Walking Dead and all sorts of things. Popped them everywhere. Super actor, but plays it with this beautifully serene expression.
Yes.
And you could mistake the curiosity when he's kind of looking. I remember seeing when he, I think it's when he uses his sort of, when he's a dagger out of his arm and he stuffs it
through the milk carton.
Yeah, that's right. And he's always looking at it and going, wow, look what I can do. But I don't think it's that. It's just him going, good. Success. And so he is. So I personally wouldn't add anything. He's machining his mission.
Yeah.
And he's so cold. I think that's right. And I don't think he has to have any character. And because they took quite a risk, actually, I think, with giving Schwarzenegger more character, rather than just making him a program that was to protect rather than to kill, which is what he is, of course. But he seems to develop. He develops humour, doesn't he? And
yes.
And he develops. It appears like he develops kindness, sort of, and sentimentality, sort of. I think they do it very well, because they're showing, because he learns, the machine learns through the course of the film. But it was a risk, but I did it. But there was lots to enjoy about it because of that. It meant there was more human film than there would otherwise have been. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, you think how relentless the Terminator is.
Yeah.
And how little humour there is in that film. Pretty much none. There's barely a joke in it. A bit in the police station, but that's what you've got.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just, oh Christ.
Running away. Yeah.
It's one of its huge strengths, of course, because it is so good. But there you go, T1000, I don't know what you do.
Well, I've a slight advantage over you in that way, because I saw Robert Patrick talking about years and years ago after T2 came out. It may even be on an extra part of it, which I tend to watch in films just to get a bit of insight. And he said that in terms of description, I think it is really hard to actually put into words something that's so visual as well, because everything is about that sort of Mercury element of him and the silence of the character, and he only speaks in order to gain access to somewhere. Otherwise, he just kills. But Robert Patrick said that the way he looked at it was that machine was like a cat.
Right.
And and he said when a cat sits and just watches and listens, and even if it doesn't move, that cat is aware of everything. Everything is measured, everything's observed, everything is sensed. And there's a book, Felidae, by Keith Perinci, and he was a cat behaviourist, and he talks about like behaviour of cats, and relating to that, one of the things he says is that cats, the reason they see in pitch blackness is, well, they don't see, they sense. If they can't hear anything, they can find where a mouse is or something in a room, because the air currents that move, that flow over their whiskers, actually cause the cat to be able to go, that's from there.
Wow.
And pinpoint something in the dark, and then they use their hearing. And I think that's what he's trying to do. I asked you that question partly because I didn't know the answer to it.
It's a really good question. I can see where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Because he is a bit like a cat, where he plays a character, you can kind of see it now. Nothing is wasted.
Yes.
The efficiency, perfection.
Yeah.
Everything that he does to try and execute his mission.
Yeah, in terms of a machine, he's far more exact.
Yes. Precision.
Yeah. It's all about precision and sensing and just executing the right action at the right time. Yeah. And the thing is, he becomes other people to give you description as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the bit with the floor is incredible.
It's outstanding.
Yeah. And do you know the guys that they had? He puts his finger through the eye of the security guard.
Yeah.
They use the. You see the two of them looking at each other.
Yes.
They're identical twins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So they used identical twins. So somewhere along the line, they must have either thought, I wonder if identical twins, we could use that. He could become the other person. But it is really clever, and I don't think I could add anything to the description apart from in the action. You'd have to talk about the fluidity of movement and things.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. There's a bit where in the movie Jaws, and I've read the book, and I think the book's way better than the film, even though the film's great.
It's a good book,
Where I can't remember the character's name now because I didn't note it in the question. The guy says, talking about sharks, and I'll read it from here. It says, and the thing about a shark is he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes like a doll's eyes, and I don't like dolls. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to even be living until he bites you, and those black eyes roll over white, and then he goes into the thing of the blood and stuff. And to me, that's obviously it's on another movie, but it was in the book. It just describes the Predator perfectly.
Sounds like the sort of thing Quinn might have said, maybe. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, it's him.
Yeah.
And Robert Shaw. And so the shark doesn't have any morality. The Terminator has no morality. The other characters fill in and add morality and thought and emotion into things. why do you think that works really well for a killer?
Well, it works for non-human killers, I think, because it allows the viewer to focus on the lack of morality and the fact that, I mean, again, for a shark, it's about mission. It's food. It's
Yes.
all, you know,
Yes.
that's what it's programmed to do. That's what it does to live. So it kills and eats. And knowing and as David Terminator has programmed and a mission to execute. I think that allows the audience to focus really hard on the core of the threat that these things pose to you as a human, because you can't talk them out, it can't be reasoned with, blah, 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 all that. So it's a perfect example of how you can coalesce a very primal human fear into a cyborg or an animal, because it is the impression given is it exists to kill you.
Yes.
That's all it does. You know, in a serial killer film, we're going to be inevitably fascinated with what it is that's damaged that person so much that they have become a serial killer. One, they have a mind, and it might be warped, and then it's going to be warped, it's going to be broken emotionally, psychologically, but there's still a mind in there, so there's something to get at.
Yeah.
And so it gives, so it sort of tempers the fear, sort of, because you might think you've got a chance with Robert Patrick comes after you with a T-1000 or Jaws is after you, then that's it.
Yeah.
You haven't got a weapon, you've done.
So it's completely primal in that way.
Easily, yeah. I think that's the thing. And I think that's that, and that which allows the flight response, the fear response, the back into a corner aggression response, all those sorts of things. It allows the film and the book to develop in that way. It allows the reader or the viewer to see themselves in that way, and it's very easy to see that.
Yeah.
I think it's harder, I think, for them to see themselves in the clutches of a serial killer, because you don't know quite what that means.
Yeah.
Because you've got ahead of you, what you haven't got is something that's definitely going to kill you right this second. You've got something that you might get away from.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, if you're a serial killer, they don't tend to let their victims go. But there is hope. Whereas in the water with the great white shark monster, there isn't any.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. I think maybe the Terminator, and then the relentlessness, everything that goes with it. Take Jaws. You're placed on a boat with these characters who are not even safe on a boat where you thought you were safe. You're actually in the unknown, and you're in the worst position you could be in.
They're the ones that provide the complexity for you versus the simplicity of the killing machine that's over here trying to get you. So the characters and their reactions and where you are, that's a complex situation.
So do you ever read horror in horror books?
Very rarely. I've read some, like Adam Neville. He's really good.
Right.
I've read all the Stephen King books.
All of them?
Pretty much, I think.
Wow.
I probably haven't read all of them, so we don't know what they're all called, but
Yeah.
I went through a stage of reading a lot of Stephen King. I mean, he's a genius. His writing is it's amazing.
Because his...
I'm not a massive horror fan, really, I wouldn't say.
Yeah. And not of movies either?
I quite like a horror movie, but again, I won't seek them out to watch. So no, I'm not huge into it, but I like it. I like to shy away from one.
Yeah, I tend to shy away from horror films and things, but there are certain things that I've picked out that I really, really enjoyed. What do you think your development has been as a writer?
That was a good question, because I'm not sure how to answer it. I mean, it was slow. I'm slow to learn sometimes. When I began writing, with very vague ideas about what I was going to write. I mean, I knew, for most of Reuben books, I literally knew who was alive at the start, who was alive at the end, and kind of what was and who they were going to defeat.
Right.
And then just write the book, see what happened. I can't do that now because it's out of control. And the record books are deliberately quite. I mean, they're action thrillers, and they are relatively simple because of that they don't deliberately draw in lots of complexity. I mean, they get more complex as they go.
Yeah.
As I learn more about the characters, you know, I mean, Reuben sold the seventh one. It's really quite a complicated book. I actually love it.
Yeah.
Made me just cry, and I actually cried while I was writing some of it as well. So they gained a lot more emotional depth, and I think I've had to learn that as development. Things like emotional depth, you know, and how you convey love and loss and grief. You can't just write words down because they become meaningless. You display all those through your characters. They're quite hard to convey.
Yeah. Like
fear is hard to convey. It's why I admire a good horror writer, like someone like Adam Neville, because I find it quite a difficult thing to convey. I'm quite good at tension in a fight, but that doesn't mean your characters are scared. And so those things that I think I've got better at.
Yeah.
What else have I written? Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think I pay more attention to detail.
Right.
And again, some might tell me, but why do you always do that? That's stupid. And I don't think any can argue successfully that is the case. But I think when I was writing The Reuben, I didn't examine every line of dialogue. Didn't examine every scene and say, is it working how I want it to? Is it?
Yeah.
You know. I think I can't leave that to my editor, funnily enough. I would almost evolve that, and I wouldn't do that now.
Right.
And I do, and actually, the key thing that I've learned is this reading out loud thing, which I used to poo-poo a lot. And as an actor, that's a strange thing to poo-poo, but I used to dismiss it. What's the point of that? I will now, when I think I finished my book, I'll read it all out loud to myself.
Oh, really?
The amount of things you trip over, and the amount of things you think that doesn't make sense. Particularly when, as you're reading, if you trip over a sentence, the sentence is wrong.
Yeah.
Because your mind is trying to tell you different words that are actually written down, so you need to go with what your mind's told you.
Yeah.
And then it might just be a single word, it might be the whole construction of the sentence is clumsy and doesn't work. I find that incredibly valuable. I used it, I think, and I hope to great effect in The Queen's Assassin.
Right.
To make the whole thing flow, to make the whole thing just sing much better than it does now. So I mean that's it. Development as a writer is like it's a journey that never ends. You know, you'll never get to a point where you are the best writer you can be. And I learn it all the time. I learn it through listening to my editor, really reading behind the comments that they've given me, you know, listening to readers, you know, and everything. And as you talked about, when you read other books and you either analyse them because you don't think you do it like that, or you analyse them because they're so good, you want to understand how it is they're so good. These are all part of development.
Yeah.
And I've gone from, I think, desiring, and in terms of what I want to write, I've gone from desiring to write the books I loved to read when I was younger, which is why The Railing came up, because they are action and character driven novels, to things which are a little bit more, I don't want to say cerebral, that would be the wrong word, more considered.
Right.
But without them being dull and slow paced, because I can't stand a novel that bores me, like none of us can, unless I'm on an arrival that I think is boring.
I think, you see, you mentioned earlier, and this is anathema to some people, about the Wheel of Time. I was looking for something to get into. I finished one series and was looking for another, and I tried that, went into Waterstones on Fleet Street and bought it, started reading it, and I was no.
Yeah.
And I just, it wasn't, something about it wasn't catching. And then you just said the word boring. I just got to the point where lots of people love it, but I got to the point where I just felt it hadn't moved on enough.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's obviously, there's going to be, and also got a lot of big cohort of readers that love the very intricate detail that some of those books have. And I haven't read much of it, so I can't really comment. But I know from what I have, there is some quite intricate detail, and it is, and the pace does move, I think, probably deliberately quite slowly.
Yeah.
Maybe the whole way through. And that's clearly been very popular with a lot of people. But those people are not going to read The Raven.
Yes, true.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
5,000 words, that is.
It's excellent. I absolutely love that book.
No, I loved it too. Actually, that's my wife is the only one she's read all the way through. She loved it because it was all about children.
Yeah.
I think she'll enjoy the Queen's Assassin as well, but she's not too keen on sort of some of the quite brutal violence of stuff like the Reuben.
Yeah.
She started reading Elsa, and when the Unknown Warrior sticks a dagger in someone's eye on page 4, she put it down.
Oh. What a shame. Because
either her wife and son.
Yeah, I've got that, but I haven't got Shout for the Dead. I lost my copy, or it's in the loft, in a book box.
Yes.
And I don't keep all the books that I've read simply because it's not that I'm a massive reader, but it would get too much. We got 3 kids, 2 dogs,
yeah,
and a hamster,
and no room.
Yeah, and no room. Yeah, so where were we up to? Oh, this is a good one, but I think probably quite common with booktubers. What advice do you wish you'd received earlier in your writing life?
Right, I think take your time, read out loud.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of what you're writing. Don't pull any punches. Because if you're working with an editor will normally tell you if something you've done is just hideous and can't be published.
Right.
Whatever reason. But I mean, nearly everything can be. I think I've been guilty of maybe not going far enough in terms of emotion or force, and maybe sort of thematically not gone quite, not really pushed it, because sometimes it feels too difficult until you really tackle it. I think you kind of have to push yourself at it. So, I don't know what your theme might be, but it might be, a favourite of mine is having religions to blame in pretty much everything that's bad. So there's lots of things that are good. But it is the root of wars and all sorts and blah blah blah. But anyway, but I don't think I've gone far enough. I think I've gone. Oh, look, I've got dogs coming. Hello. I can't pick her up. She's about 20 kilograms.
Yeah.
India. You don't go away. You're not going. I'll just ignore her. She's running over. Go on, Figo. Go on. Go on. No, go. Go on. Go outside. No, go outside. Go on. Go on. Go on. Go on. Go on. Go on. Go. She might insert herself in the conversation sometime.
Yeah.
One bit of brilliant advice I got when I became a full-time author was from Rob Grant, one of the guys that wrote Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
He was actually doing a book with Gollancz at the time, and we were having some meeting with drink, I expect. But it wasn't within COVID, it was in COVID, pre-COVID time, so it wasn't a leave
Right.
or anything. And I said to him, what advice would you give a full-time author? And he just said, get dressed in the morning. A brilliant piece of advice, because it's about separating you from your home life when you're at home. That's what he meant.
Yeah.
Now, don't go to your office in your dressing gown. It's almost like, because it's like you. So I've always maintained, always got up. I sit on a black t-shirt nearly every day, like a uniform. Now I get up, I have breakfast elsewhere. This is where I work, and then when I'm not at work, I go somewhere else. I mean, I'm lucky because I've got a room I can use as an office. I'm fortunate.
Yeah.
I'm what has that. But I think the more you can separate, for me anyway, the more I can separate my work from my leisure, the more efficient I'll be at my work, I think.
Do you write every day?
Yeah.
You do?
I don't tend to write a lot at the weekends. I will do notes.
Right.
Unless I'm on deadline or when my wife's away and kids are at play or whatever, then. But normally it's too busy to do much writing at the weekend because there's too much going on.
Who sets your deadline?
Sorry?
Who sets your deadlines?
Well, being a contract, I guess, but within the delivery deadline, I mean, you've got your own loads of your own deadlines about when you want to finish your first draft, when you want to have revised it, when you want to then done your second draft, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And those are deadlines that I willfully break at every single stage, obviously, and then leave it all till the last couple of months, like most of us probably do. Then have a phone up and go, can I have a bit more time before I do this book?
And how long is it before, say, on The Queen's Assassin, you write, it takes you however long it takes.
Yeah.
You get to the end, you hand it over, you go through an editorial process, and then how long typically before they will actually publish your book?
I think The Queen's Assassin it's been very different, because I've actually been writing that one for, well, by the time it comes out, it'll be 5 years since the time of Granny.
Right.
Which it doesn't seem that long ago that it is. And the writing process was very long, because not just because of COVID, but COVID didn't slow everything down, because we had children at home doing school, and also we'd moved house, and we were building the house that we live in now, and life was extremely complex, and there wasn't much time for anything. But once I'd handed it in, then Gillian and I had an awful lot of discussions about how it was structured, because it was mainly right, but there was something which was nagging her, which kind of, for her, unsettled the book, unsettled the flow, unsettled the way that it ran.
Right.
And so she made some suggestions, and we had a not very long conversation about them on a Teams meeting one evening, and then decided it would be a good idea to make some quite significant structural changes to the book.
Okay.
I'm really glad I did, because it's made it so much better. It was already good. Now I think it's well, I say it's why I think it's my best book. I think it's exceptional now, for me.
When you say structural changes, can you qualify that? What does that actually
well,
mean?
it's about it was about how the different parts of the different groupings of characters and how parts of the narrative actually fitted together.
Right.
And what she felt was that parts of they were always running independently, and all of a sudden they can mash up right at the end, because it's like, oh, we've got to finish the book now, crunch. So what we needed to do was to integrate them more gently and earlier. So I had to and it was about how, I can't probably give too much away, but the book's not out yet, but there were various different drivers to various different conspiracies.
Okay.
And what I'd done is I'd made them all whole, and they're all loving worked on their own. What it didn't quite do, or did in my head, but not quite in Gillian's head, I think that was the problem, because she's like the reader at the time.
Yeah.
So it didn't coalesce early enough for her to get why the ending was the ending that it was.
Okay.
It almost felt like it was that some bits had been dropped away and some bits had been pushed sort of almost square peg in round hole style to make the ending work.
Yeah.
And so it was good, it didn't work well enough, it wasn't smooth enough. And so basically I've twined the threads much more closely together the whole way through, and it works so much better as a result, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you find yourself, when you had to adjust the structure, that you had to go back and change actual parts of the book to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, it wasn't. Yeah, what it was. Yes, because I stripped out entire chapters and sequences, because they were no longer going to work, because they were, and the timeline had to change. So I was trying to chop and change that, and then you've got to try and make it all still consistent, because you can leave little clues in paragraphs you haven't read close enough, which allude something that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
So there's quite a lot of so I redraft chapters in a chapter which was about one thing might be about 2.5 things.
Right.
It was about this bunch of merchants, and it would be about this bunch of religious zealots, if you see what I mean. And rather than try to keep them separate, they had to work together to make it. I mean, they didn't work physically together, but the chapter had to work as a 2-strand chapter, as opposed to a 1-strand chapter, to bring everything to a satisfactory conclusion.
Yeah, so
I mess up my told you there, but thank you.
yeah, like I suppose might view it as it feels a bit like a car crash. You know, all of a sudden, all these events have to happen very quickly in order to get the end result.
I tell you, I remember one thing about the structural change that just occurred to me, because it seems to be a while since I did it, is that the prime motivation of one of the central characters, which runs like Blackpool through a stick of rock, is the screenplay, isn't it? Didn't work.
Okay.
It was. I think when we talked about it, I thought it did, and then Gillian brought up a couple of things we were talking about, and she just said, she said, I don't think because of this that she would do this or this or this. I don't think it would inform that sort of decision making and that sort of action.
Right.
When I thought about it, I thought, you know what, you're right. And that led to a lot of issues, not problems, so just challenges you have to overcome, because I had to think of a different prime motivator for her that would lead her to the actions that she took.
Yeah.
And then you have to strip out all the allusions to the first motive that I decided that drove her from when she was a small child to the events of the actual book itself.
Right.
So there was that also took a lot. So that, because you needed to be credible and powerful, and the other one was powerful, but in the end it wasn't credible.
Right.
Given what she does and what she did, and how she acts and what she wants. So there you go. I'll say no more.
Yeah, I know it's hard to talk about something without giving too much away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I presume then, from your comments, that you're like really pleased with the Queen's Assassin and the way it's developed.
I honestly couldn't be happier.
Absolutely.
And I think the reaction of Gillian and the people that did the audio recording and a couple of others that fed back, my copy editor, they'll really love it, and I've not had that sort of reaction to before a book like that.
For the audio book, were you given? Did they tell you? Did the Gollancz decide who the voice actors will be for it?
Well, it was offered to me.
Oh right.
But because the main protagonist is a woman, I felt that my voice was the wrong voice for it, and I wanted to have an actress do it, a female actress, I think I'll do it. So I've got a couple of clips that they sent me of people, and a lady called Mel Hudson did an absolutely outstanding job. Just her voice is perfect. And when we spoke, she was asking me questions about certain bits and pieces. I could kind of, she felt like she was really into the story, into the characters and stuff. So
yeah. But the thing is that
outstanding job.
It's, and that's keep going right back to the beginning of today where we started. Is in a way she's filling in those gaps,
yes,
and you're seeing her fill those
100%,
gaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think she brings the main characters to life. I mean, the three central real central characters. There's two women and a man, and so I thought it was very important that a woman narrated it, because they're the real drivers of the whole book, the two of them. And I think her idea of their individual voices, when I heard their ideas, it just thought, yes, that's exactly how I could hear it in my head.
Right.
Thank you very much, and please carry on.
Yeah.
So for me, she really got it. She got the whole thing.
Brilliant.
Really pleased.
And we'll run through a couple of questions. What have you found to be the biggest challenge when you were acting?
Listening. They say it is a core skill of acting, and it doesn't mean that I'm not listening and not present in the scene that I am in, but an actual acting is about reacting.
Right.
It is. I guess it's at the core of every good actor's sort of skill set. This ability to, because even though you know backwards the line you're about to say, you need to be able to react to the way that the other actor has said their cue line for you. And you also need to be able to understand exactly the context of it. And so, you know, their tone, their pace, their emotion might be different to what you were expecting when you read the script.
Yeah.
And it might be different every performance if you're in theatre. And you need to be able to react to that in the moment. And I have traditionally found that quite hard, to work really hard on that. And you can work with it, I mean, a good director will help you. I was in a play a couple of years ago, did The Importance of Being Earnest in one of the sort of off West End,
Yeah.
in the Rocky Jack in Lewisham. And it was brilliant fun. I was working with some brilliant cast. And the director took me aside once and talked about the listening skill. And so we did a bit of coaching around that. And once I got myself far enough into my character that I could find a time to listen to the other characters around me at all times, my performance improved beyond all measure.
Right.
So that's what it is. It's not, you know, line learning is easy. Understanding my character, I think that helps that I'm a writer, but understanding my character I've always found quite easy. Understanding the context of a play or a script I've always found relatively straightforward, because I've been in writing all my life, pretty much. But it's that particular core skill is difficult. And actors that are good at it are probably the best actors.
So it's listening as in sort of being able to bridge the gap between the line, the emotion, the feel, and drawing on, like they always say about actors, that you love working with actors who who inspire them, who deliver their lines in particular ways that make you believe and feel.
Yes. But and that's the thing, and they're really good at delivering it a slightly different way every time.
Right.
I mean, Ian Holden's famous, who played Bilbo in Lord of the Rings, is famous for every single take he would deliver his line in a different way, give the director more options, and then it would also then challenge the actors he was with to deliver more options.
Right.
One of the reasons he's such a great actor.
Yeah.
Was actually such a great actor. But yeah, because what you have to be as an actor is not just waiting for someone to finish their line. So that's like a school play. Not standing there like this. Oh, my turn. So you have to be in the moment every moment.
And that's hard, right?
It's really hard. It's really hard because you have to both be lost in what you're doing and also very much aware of your physical presence, your location on the stage or on the set.
Yeah.
And where your lines are to the audience, or where your lines are to the other actors. You've got to be aware of all the technical stuff at the same time as being so lost in what it is you're acting that you just react in the most natural way possible with the line you've already learned. It's not like you're not just saying the line, the line that comes into your head. Unless you're doing Mike Lee, then you might actually be doing that. So you might be improvising the whole thing, but generally speaking, you're not. You're reading from the script. And you've learned from the script, and those are the lines you need to say. But you have to make it like they're not lines you've learned.
Isn't that the real challenge of actually getting the gig in the first instance?
Yeah.
Is that you go you're given the lines and interpret.
Right. So the auditions are the most. Well, they're soul destroying in as much as, I reckon I get 1 in 20, maybe worse than that. Often you go in and you're not going to get it because you don't look right. And that's particularly true of commercials and sort of 3-liners in TV, that sort of thing. You need to look like the right person for us. They'll send you away. Luckily on stage it's a bit different.
Yeah.
But be able to, in an audition situation, be able to take the half page they've given you, something you've never seen before, if it's something you've never seen before, and to make something of it is tricky,
Yeah.
That's why you might as well go for it. You've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So you might even ignore if there's any sort of direction from the writer. You probably should ignore that. Go your own way.
Okay.
And then they challenge you, just say I didn't agree with what they said. The thing is, it gets you into conversation. Then you have the conversation with the casting director.
Yeah.
But they get to know more about you. So if you can get them to talk to you, because that's pretty hard in itself. So it's all a game.
Yeah.
Audition.
Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah, I know he's been friends for ages. Yeah.
All right.
Of the launch of his first book, we've been friends ever since.
His first book was
Blade itself.
Blade itself. Yeah, that was the first one I read of his.
He's lovely.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely person. Yeah. So yeah.
The Blade itself I really enjoyed, and but I enjoyed it most because of Glocker.
Yeah. Well, I think don't we all?
Yeah.
He's one of those characters that just lives in your mind forever.
Yeah. He's great. There was an Ian Banks book, Consider Philibus. Yeah.
Yeah, Philibus. Yeah.
And at the beginning, the assassin's chained up in a chamber he's meant to drown in, and I really liked that character from that book as well. You know, it drew me in. He wasn't. You could call him an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glocker was just mean, hilarious but mean.
Hilarious. I mean, no, but he was exactly what he needed to be, wasn't he? But he was so beautifully drawn. I thought.
Yeah.
Just considering he was a David, you think how much his writing developed and how skilled he is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't try and write like Joe because I don't want to. I don't think, and I'd be very much something. I don't have some of the skills that he's got in for the way he can pick out a description in a few words. I mean, I love that he does that.
Yeah.
But you know, we should never try and emulate stuff. Just try and learn from it.
So would you meet? You know him personally, right?
Yeah.
So would you meet if you meet with Joe Abercrombie? Would you then sit down and say, "Oh, what you're working on?" And you have those type of conversations.
Yeah, and we don't see each other very much. We live in Bath. I live in London, so it tends to be when there's sort of a meeting of authors or whatever going on at the publishing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we don't talk much on Twitter or anything like that, particularly. But yeah, but we would. Yeah, but a bit, you know, it'd also be about how, because we got a mutual friend. I mean,
right.
one of my school friends lived in the same street as him in Bath, bizarrely.
Right.
And it was a complete coincidence that they were also called Joe. So we talk about him and what. So it's about families, so his wife Lou a little bit, and obviously we've got both families and everyone's growing up. It might be about what. Because I went to him for advice. So I know he's used a sit-to-stand desk for a long time.
Oh right, yeah.
When I was having some back problems, I wanted to look into it too, so I asked him when he got into it. So I asked him what the benefits of it were. And he talked about not just about the lack of back pain, but about the energy you get from standing up and writing, as well as sitting down and writing. So I think it's quite a mood thing, and he's right.
Yeah, it does bring an energy.
Yes. Hang on a minute. Stupid. That's my sit-to-stand desk.
All right.
If I stay here, I'm going to go above my head.
So he's influenced you massively again. Yeah.
Sorry, that's very stupid.
That's fine. The two last questions for you. What non-fiction title has inspired you the most and why?
That was a really interesting question, because I kind of got. Am I allowed two?
Yeah, you can have two.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you one because you've got the book sitting there. I read In the Name of Rome by Adrian Goldsworthy.
Right.
I'm very interested in Roman culture. I read it and it is brilliant. I think I've read loads of his books on Rome and the Romans now. And that is why Descendants of Esteria is in a Romanesque society.
Right.
Not a different one. Because it probably would have been medieval. Otherwise, because that's what I'd done before. When I read that, I thought, come on.
Yeah.
This is too good.
There's so much about Roman history that is known.
Yes.
And the influences they've had that it's hard to avoid in some ways.
Yeah. But I need it sort of coalesced. I need to understand, warfare in general and the rise and fall of the society, that sort of stuff, because Esteria is on the verge of collapse. It's overexpanded.
Yeah.
Or it should go over. So it's sort of teacher. So So I just found that, but I didn't know how to, didn't know where to place it. And I didn't read that with deliberate to think, well, shall I write it in Roman place? I just read it because it got recommended.
Right.
As a history book on Rome. I mean, it's blew me away. Fantastic book. Then the other one, because I'm a Lansdowne, you said,
Yeah.
is a book called Race to the Pole, which is about Scott at the Antarctic, written by Ranulph Fiennes.
Oh, right.
It is, it's like an action book. And just the fortitude and the bravery and the endurance of these men, and particularly as they realise they're about to die, and the fact that they all died 11 miles from where they would have been safe. It's a tragedy, it's heroism, it's courage, it's all sorts of things.
And again, it's in the face of an implacable enemy as well.
100%, yeah. I've got a whole half shelf of stuff about captive boats and about all the other characters that are involved in it, you know. So I've just kind of really got into the sort of, it's almost mythology now of those men who went out to do that. You know, the tragedy then being beaten by the Norwegian guys who used dogs, and the number of mistakes that they made, some of them terribly Britishly stupid.
Right.
Because they weren't practical. You know, they used mules and donkeys and stuff, things that weren't suited, which they ended up eating, of course, because they ran out of I think they planned to eat or something, but they had to eat early and stuff, and then stuff went wrong because they hadn't packed it enough ice, and they just made such a lot of mistakes, and you could see Amundsen with his dogs like,
yeah.
It felt like he was tearing along, because he beat them by quite a long distance.
Yeah.
You know, they got there and he'd already left the note. Not a hard note,
yeah.
Really empathetic note and stuff. I just loved it. Loved that book.
Last question. I think it's the last question anyway. What novel have you read that has made you think most about your own writing of dialogue?
I'm going to have to probably say kind of anything by David Gemmell that I've read, which is almost all of it.
Right. I've never read any Gemmell.
You haven't read any?
No.
I think it's the sheer power of his dialogue.
Right.
How you know his characters believe every single word that they are saying.
Okay.
And if they're doing heroic dialogue, or when they're lying, the way that they dress up their lies, and he was a friend of mine, David. I met him on a trip to sign in France. And I met him on the train, and we had dinner and stuff, and he was introduced by a guy called Stan Higgins, who wrote a great series called Orcs.
Right.
Really good fun. And so we became friends. I went down to see him a few times and talked to him about writing. And what I learned from him about how he does dialogue and how I quite often now do dialogue is that when he's written it, he again, it's about reading out loud. He will speak it in character,
yeah,
and loud or soft. And he read me a passage of his once. I kind of there with my glass of wine because when he spoke, he believes everything that his characters are saying. So it comes across with this enormous force.
Right. Excellent.
And the society turned around and said, "What do you think? Can I do any better than that?" And I said, "What? The writing or the reading? The writing or the reading?" No, the writing. And I said, "You're asking me." And this sort of extremely famous fantasy writer asking me if I could improve on the way it's just written. I said, I have to think about that.
Yeah, that's quite intimidating.
But early in our friendship, we'd be saying, well, actually, David, I think it's fine. A couple of things you got wrong there, mate. So I think what that encouraged me about in terms of dialogue, again, it's not to be afraid of writing what the character believes and the way they would say it. So again, you don't pull any punches. You never put any punches in any of his dialogue. Any of his writing, to be honest, none of his dialogue. And so it carried punch, and it carried force, and it carried energy, and so and that's what drives you along in the conversations. Now, particularly if they're about sort of going into battle, or the certainty of death, or perilous sense of life, those things. He was so good at expressing that stuff, and it's all because he understood his characters so well, and they were able to express themselves in a way that dragged you through it. It never felt still or dull, even though it was fantasy-ish language and in a fantasy setting and stuff. It always felt you knew they'd be what they were saying.
Yeah.
And that's obviously critical.
And if I will write it down, if I was going to start with David Gemmell's books, what would you recommend as a starting point?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you can either start with the first one, so you go and read Waylander, which is his first book. It's quite an old book now, so I mean again, of its time and stuff. But the Drenai, which is this series, Brenai, which is Waylander. Oh my God, Druss. Always called Legend, I think. Is it Legend? My God, that's really different. I can't remember that. And the third one is The King Beyond the Gate. Okay. And they're three superb books. They're just great fantasy books, the classics of the genre. Legend, it is Legend. That's not Druss. Druss is the Legend. Or if you want to read something which is more about mythology, he's written a series about the travels of Odysseus.
Oh, right.
Which is really good. And the first one is called. Second one's Lord of the Silverburn. The first one is, I can't remember now. Anyway, look it up.
I shall look it up. We did that when I was in school.
Yeah, but it's a whole different take. But again, when his Odysseus is speaking, it's like listening to. It's like. I'm going to say listening to a real person, because that's exactly how he makes it feel, even though this is a man from myth and legend.
Yeah. Well, there's I think with dialogue and writing in general, it is, we've said it, it's about bridging that gap. And if you get somebody to feel things and to think and everything else as they read, it makes them read more.
Yeah. And
it means you've done your job.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can't read anymore, honestly. I haven't read a crap book by him.
Yeah.
Other than not quite as brilliant as others for me, but I love the style of his writing, so I mean, you might not like it.
Yeah. I shall try it. Actually, there is another question I can ask you, but it'll probably be edited out. Do you write full time?
Yes. Well, technically.
Technically.
Yeah, but I have a lot of other things I have to do during the day.
Yeah.
Childcare and whatnot. And when I get acting work, I do acting work. I don't get very much of it.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say. I mean, my official job would be as a full-time writer. Yeah.
I just want to point something out to you of one of the mistakes you've made.
Go on.
In your writing career, was that there was not a third book in this series.
There was supposed to be. There was going to be. I had sort of some random magic ideas going on, but yeah, I moved on to something else. I wanted to do Raven Soul.
Right.
And then by the time I'd done that, I'd moved on to something else.
Well, the Chronicles of the Raven, I found them first in Waterstones on Fleet Street.
Yeah.
And you know, when you look at all the different fantasy covers and the swords and the shields, fire, dragons, and the covers really stood out. They were those beautiful black. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they did well.
Yeah, they were superb covers. And but I didn't enjoy Legends as much as I enjoyed Chronicles.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just one of those things.
Way in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, but I enjoyed them. Probably because the characters were fresher in the first three.
Yeah.
You know, for that reason. But they were, I've enjoyed a number of books. I've got the Elves. I've got that series to read now on Kindle and stuff. Yeah. When did you write those?
There's a sobbing moment in the third one of those as well, I'll tell you.
Oh, right, okay. Well, you're talking to... when I went to see, which one? The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes.
I've been so involved in Lord of the Rings, and I read the whole thing every now and again. I've even got through the Silmarillion. That when I went to see that at the cinema, the bit where Frodo is slipping away to become a ring wraith, I cried during that bit. Yeah, that really got to me.
Yes.
And yet Tolkien doesn't write a great deal of like emotional content into those works either.
No, but I think the filmmaking did that for you, didn't it?
Yeah, it does. I've not criticised, but the bits I skip now are the songs. You know, the big epic songs. I've like had enough of those over the years. Yeah, and I always get to the point where I think I see a song and I go, oh, I'll just skip it, and then I think, and a little voice says to me, well, you haven't read all of the book, have you, if you don't read the songs? And then I try and I go, no.
No, but the thing is, once you've read them and you understand, you've been through it, you know why they're there, you haven't got to do that.
Yeah.
They don't actually add anything more to the plot.
No, they don't.
They love the description. I mean, it's all part of this huge mythology, isn't it? It's wonderful stuff, but
yeah,
you haven't got to. Don't beat yourself up, Reuben. I think.
Yeah. What was it that got you into fantasy in the beginning?
My brother.
Right.
He was reading. He used to read science fiction and fantasy. So he handed me The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings when I was probably too young to read them, but I was always a voracious reader, so I think I read.
Right.
I read Lord of the Rings when I was 11, I think, and Hobbit when I was 7 or something. So probably a bit young, but loved them. But then he would give me stuff like, so he'd give me like Brian Aldiss and Arthur C. Clarke and all sorts. So I got quite an early grounding in sort of classic science fiction and fantasy for me, and then I just carried on. I didn't have to stop reading it, so I just absorbed any author I could find, and then D&D came along, and a game called Dragon Quest, which is where the rain came from.
Okay.
Because Hero Tolkien was my character in Dragon Quest. Technically alive, actually.
Yeah.
Very badly damaged and hiding in basically in a cupboard somewhere, but still alive. So it's been like a central part of my life forever, really. Yeah,
it seems like that for me. I never read Lord of the Rings until I played Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And that was because I've got a younger sister and my brother died. He was going out, and one time I said, can I come with you? He was going into town in Liverpool with a load of his friends, and when he went, yeah, okay. So I went along. I think I was 11.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this is great. And we went to this shop, and you went in and it was all jigsaws and everything else upstairs and wooden puzzles.
Yeah.
When you went downstairs, it was a spiral staircase into this amazing place full of lead figures and paints and all of that, and all the different modules for D&D. And they were the only place that did them. There was no Amazon or whatever to be able to get these type of things from. And that got me into it. And then I read The Lord of the Rings 2 years later.
It's funny because my brother that got me into D&D because he had him and some of his mates came and used to play around our house.
Yeah.
I just went in one night.
Yeah, that's what happened to
How
me.
was that?
Right, I think I probably kept you long enough. It's been 2 hours, 20 minutes.
It was super fun, though. We really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Because you start to worry when you're the first one I've done as an interview.
Right.
Although I've done an interview with Steve. But that man, by the way, Steve, is a maniac when it comes to books.
He's lovely, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
He knows a lot more than I do about him, I've got to tell you.
But his bookcase behind him is only one tiny little thing of the actual books, and he'll come on, he'll go, I bought this and I bought this. Somebody on Twitter recently who I follow, they went out and they said, I got some money together. They bought 40 books. books.
40.
40 in one go. Yeah. And then they go on a shelf or in a box, and then they're to be read from whenever you get to them, you know.
Wow.
Well, I'm glad that I've been all right, and that you've enjoyed it.
It's been super. It's really been really good fun, mate. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
Thank you. And I'm hoping that I've invited some other people on, but nobody has accepted. Oh no, Michael Fletcher accepted, but he didn't want to do 6 lines. He wanted to. He said he didn't think he could be that focused for that amount of time.
Right.
But he would just come on and have a chat.
If he sees the one that we've just done, it might change his mind.
Yeah, maybe.
I didn't feel it was that focused. We talked a lot around the 6 lines.
You know, I came up with the idea of 6 lines. It just came because I was thinking about what Steve was doing.
Yeah.
And I thought, if you can distill something down in a book, and I was thinking about my own writing, and then thought, and then when you said the Terminator, it's like, bang, it just solidifies everything, as you said about that story, but it affects everything else in writing.
Yeah, that's true. Go and have some lunch.
Yes, I know, and let the dogs out if the back door isn't open. You were reading Dissension. Yeah. As well.
Yeah.
Well, are you far into it?
I'm enjoying this. I'm not a million miles into it. I've probably read about 6, 7 chapters, something like that.
All right.
So we got stuck into a bit. I'm from working out the characters and stuff, and
that's what my son said.
People's places and who's on whose side and all that sort of nonsense. So
yeah,
all the usual shenanigans at the start of the book. So.
Well, that's what I said that to my son. If you're thinking there's too many characters in a book, right? Can I just point this out to you? And you can turn the page on that one. There's more as well.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, I hope you've enjoyed what you've read, and
so far so good. I think is what I would say.
Yeah.
You've got a nice touch, deft touch with your description, by the way. Yeah. That's so.
Oh right, thank you.
Yeah.
Because
well, it's not too much for you. See this? So you're a bit like me.
I think so.
Yeah, just enough is enough.
Yeah. Because when you overdo it, it's like
very easy to overdo it.
Yeah.
So easy.
Yeah. I think with fantasy as well.
Yeah.
Because
there's a temptation in it, to give everything. It's got to resist that temptation.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment, because that was one of the things I worried about, as well as whether there was enough description in there, whether it was good enough.
I think there is. Well, for me, so far.
Yeah.
When I finish, I might come back with all sorts of different ideas.
Yeah. Well, if when you get to the end of it, you've got any thoughts, let me have them, please.
Yeah, of course I will. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, but at least it isn't going to be, this book is terrible, never write again. I can safely say that already, so that's very
well, that's encouraging.
That's a start.
Yeah, because I edited that. It was, I think, about 45,000 words I took out.
Yeah, that's good.
When I edited it. That was because of Stephen King on writing.
Yeah. Well, that's the seminal tone, isn't it, about
writing? Yeah. I thought, I've got to. If you don't, I can't remember what the ratio was, but he said if you don't cut this amount out, you probably find that it's bloated. You know, and it wasn't you've got to cut 10,000 words. It was something like you'll find that sort of a quarter or a third of it you don't need.
No, but you've got to be harsh.
Yeah.
I've taken out passages of books I really love, and I put them in a folder because I think that's lovely. But you can't use it; it doesn't work.
Yeah.
In context of the novel, it's not right. You might give it another character on another day in another book.
Yes, and thank you for agreeing to come on. You've been one of my favourite authors for a long time. It's a real privilege.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed it so much I can't tell you. I could talk to you forever.
Thank you. Right. Have a good rest of your day, whatever you might be doing. And
happy writing, really.
Thank you very much. Cheers.